All right, you can see the screen now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, I think we can get started. So, hello everyone. So, this module we're gonna talk today is actually one of the important module. So, I think in the last module we kind of discussed about the creation of the PDD documentation, right? That was one of the most important tasks that we're gonna do as a business analyst, right? And the specific format that we shared was all about the UiPath format and all the project related information that you want to kind of document, pass on to the developer, solution architect, and everything depends on that, right? So, did we only have one assignment last week? I think you should have got two every week, right? So mostly there should be two assignments that was given at the end of both the sessions. So today we're gonna talk through the next phase. So once this phase comes in, when your kind of PDD development creations are complete, and you have passed on the PDD documentation to the developer, the bot has been developed, and it has been pushed for the testing and UAT planning. UAT is nothing but it stands for user acceptance testing. So when an application is developed, we go through a lot of testing phases based on the application type, the application category, the usage of the application. So we have various phases of testing, right? So generally in RPA we generally go with the main phase of the testing is the user acceptance testing that goes in. Apart from this, some companies sometimes go with unit testing, regression testing, yeah, and stuffs like that, integration testing. So if you have multiple components of an application working together, let's say you have 6 7 applications to which you are talking, so first, initially, what happens is they check the integration of each and every application with UiPath. So that depends. But once the product is developed by the developer and it needs to be tested by the business user or your client, right? We start the testing phase. We set the product to the client and say, hey, this is ready for your use. Can you go back and check and let us know if it is passing all the test cases, if it is working. So the purpose of running UAT is nothing but to ask the client to use the product and kind of revert back with the opinion that all the use cases and all the scenarios that they have given are kind of fulfilled by the bot or not, or do they require any sort of changes, anything needs to be modified and things like that, right? So that's the importance of the testing phase. So if we look at the UAT lifecycle and what's the BA role, okay, so this diagram shows you the various cycles of the UAT. So first we're going to start with the test strategy, right? So what does the test strategy approach would be? So you would be defining the testing approach to achieve the objectives or the standards in providing the testing. So that's what I just said, right? The test strategy's intention or the approach is that we're going to define how the testing is going to happen, what are the testing objectives or standards, what are the standards we're going to follow, how do we document all the testing cases, how do we kind of categorize the testing, the use cases and things like that. So entire your entire UAT strategy gets defined in this first phase. Okay, now we go, once your strategy is defined, you go with the test design. So in the test design we prepare the test plan, the test cases of the scenarios and the test data. Now this you have to work along with the business users or the client to get it done, right? So test plan is something which you're going to share as a part of your strategy, that this is the broad robot we're going to use, or this is the robot we're going to test. So this is the plan we're going to perform it for last 2 hours every day, and all these what do you say, managerial details that you're going to share, and say the test scenarios or the test cases which you get already from the business user, right? So you already would have got the test data, the access to the test application of test environment of the application, and the use cases that you have. So you have to kind of put that together and make the entire test design. So you have your deadlines, you have your timings, you have your plan ready, then you have your scenarios or use cases to be tested. So for example, what does a scenario or a use case stands for, right? So let's say the first use case is, let's say that the input of the bot is coming from a email attachment. So the first test case that is given to you is to test whether the bot is able to download the attachment from the email on whatever conditions it has. So this is the first test case which you want to test. So you are not going to test, it might be the business users who's going to run it, or the SMEs who's going to run it, and you are the one who's going to facilitate it. So you got to be the channel between the developer and the business or the client, right? So any issues being reported has to come to you as a business analyst, and you would pass on it to the developer, or it's going to be vice versa. For any issues that has been, or any bug that has been fixed by the developer, it's going to be informed to you as a business analyst, and you would pass on the information back to the client or the business analyst, business user. So this is how it works. So your entire activity of the bot could be divided into, let's say, 10 to 15 test cases, right? Whether if you are having downloading the reports from an application, so that could be an also in testing case, whether the bot is able to download, applications in all scenarios from a specific website or whatever it is. So after your test strategy or test design, we execute something called as test execution. Now what does test execution do? This is the main phase where the testing is eventually performed, right? So we perform the testing, reporting successful and failed test. So let's say you have 15 test cases. On the first run, there were 10 cases which were successful, and there were 5 cases which has failed, right? So what do you do? So we're going to learn in the subsequent sessions, how do we track all these testing things and testing data, right? So you're going to record each and everything. Let's say out of 15, 10 has passed, 5 has failed. So you're going to record what are all the test cases that has passed, what are all the test cases that have failed. Now if the test cases have failed because of the data, that's something you have to check with the business users or the client. If the test case has failed because of the bot could not perform it, this is something where there's a bug in the system which has yet to be reported to the developer. So you're going to document those failure test cases and come back to the developer and say, hey, these are the 5 test cases which we identified that the bot isn't working. Can you have a look? So there could be, certain reason. It's the misconception of the people, as a part of a human mindset, is anything goes wrong with the bot, they say the bot doesn't work. But there are a lot of scenarios I have seen practically, where the bot is exactly fine, the bot is designed as it needs to be, but it's the environment or the ambience where the bot works does not work. Let's say the test data were wrong, or the application did not respond as expected, and a lot of things. The input given by the business user was incorrect. He has to give an Excel file, he is giving a PDF file as an input. So it doesn't make sense, right? So if it has failed, you better go through initial analysis, right, to check where the thing has exactly gone wrong. Is it the business user who is giving an incorrect data? Is it the type of data that has been changed and given incorrectly? Is it actually the application which is not responding, right? So let's say it depends on some application where you are downloading reports, and during testing phase the application might go non-responsive, so your test case would have failed, but that does not mean the bot is not working. So you're going to try it again. You're going to check if the application is up and running, and then try it again and see, oh, now it has passed. Okay, so that means in the initial case there was a application dependency, but that doesn't mean that the bot has failed. So that's how you're going to kind of investigate through it and analyze the research on the issue and then come to a conclusion. But yes, if you see any test case which is repeatedly failed, right? So let's say the final test case was to send out emails to 20 people, whereas the bot is only sending emails to 10 people. So obviously there is an issue with respect to the mapping of the address where the bot is taking the input from, right? It has to map 20 email addresses, whereas it's mapping only 10. So that means there's a bug. So then you have to go and back to the developer and say, hey, we need to send out emails to 20 people. This is the list the bot is going to map to, but it's just mapping only 10. So that's a bug that you're going to report. and it's going to be assigned to the developer to work on, right? So once the developer fix the problem, it's going to be reissued back to you. I mean, the bot is going to be kind of republished or whatever it is, and it's going to restart the testing. Now it depends. Sometimes what happens, if it's a minor bug, the team goes with the testing on a daily basis. By the time the developer fixes that minor bug, and once he fixes the bug, he kind of re-establishes the code, and then they start the testing end to end. Now that depends on how the scenario is, how the bugs are. So let's say the bug is in the middle of the active bot, so you are downloading reports from application, emails, or any other input source, but your application is not able to download the reports. So that means your subsequent activities will not be working. So you cannot carry out the UAT test in those cases, right? So you kind of have to, you might need to pause the UAT testing, give the issue back to the developer to fix it, and then republish the code and come back and start the UAT once again, right? So that depends. If it's an end activity where you are able to carry out the other test cases, then you can run the UAT and wait for the developer to fix that specific bug and re-establish the code. So that depends upon scenario to scenario. So in your test execution, we have already covered coordinating UAT. So that's what your coordinating is all about, performing the test reports. Yes. So as I said, if your test cases are successful, you're going to document that. If your test cases have failed, you're going to document that. So, and also the performance report. So how long the bot is taking to complete specific tasks. So you might have already identified certain areas where the performance of the bot needs to improve based on the project, right? So you have to kind of also analyze your performance, right? So your generally what happens is there are a lot of tools that gets integrated with UiPath. For example, we have Elasticsearch and Kibana, which is an additional feature. So if those setups are already there, it will be very helpful as a business analyst for you to kind of track the performance of the bot. Or else you kind of have to manually fetch it from the orchestrator, that when the bot was executed, when did the bot stop, how much time it has eventually taken to complete the task, right? But if your infrastructure is built up on an with a higher end setup, it becomes easy for you to kind of track each and everything. Okay. Next comes the defect management. So I think I've already explained it. So defect management is where you track the defects and report those defects to the developer, and it goes for debugging. So the concept of debugging is nothing but rectifying or fixing the bugs or the errors that have come up during the testing. So that's what happens in your defect management. And then finally you come up with the test closure. So let's say you started the UAT, you executed the UAT, right? You identified certain errors and bugs. It was reported to the developer. It was fixed. The code was re-established. You again started the UAT, and till your UAT planning for how many days you want to run the UAT, it's all running fine. It's completely clear, right? So you get the UAT sign off from the client or the business saying that, hey, we have performed the testing from our end and the bot is ready to deploy in production, right? And detailed reporting analysis. What is the performance of the bot? How many test cases have been kind of re-established? Which portions are running fine? So you create an entire report of the UAT, submit it to the client and get it approved. Now, once your UAT is approved, that means the bot's testing is complete. The developer and the implementation guys is gonna now work on pushing the bot onto the real-time environment or the production level. So till now we have been using the applications testing environment or the development environment. Now they need to move the bot where the bot will use the live application environment. It's not going to anymore deal with the test data or dummy data. It's now going to deal with the live data from the business that are coming or generated. Okay, so that's how is the post, and that we call it as move to production, MTP. So once your UAT is complete, the next phase of the RPA lifecycle is that you push your code, you push your bot to the production environment to kind of start working on a real-time basis, right? So any questions on these guys? Any questions on the strategy, design, defect management, and closure? because this is very, very important. You're going to perform a very important role in terms of carrying out the UAT and testing. So all your dynamics needs to be perfectly fine. If anything goes wrong with the dynamics, you did not identify any test case failure properly, then your client might not give you a sign off, and that could kind of, and if you overlook any feature that is not working in the UAT and the bot goes to the production, that's it, end of story. If production data gets misused, that's like a complete blunder, right? So that's the purpose of carrying out UAT, and getting an UAT successful sign off, so that nothing goes wrong in the production environment. How long does this process cycle take? So do you mean the UAT cycle or the entire our project life cycle? Okay, UAT generally depends. That's what I said. So it depends upon how complex is your project, how in coordination with your project manager and client you have decided to run the UAT. So let's say even if it's a high complex, generally we take it for, on an average, we at least take it for 2 weeks. 2 weeks in the sense, 10 working days, 10 business days. 2 weeks is the minimum time that we implement the bot for UAT, so that when you develop a process, you have a lot of scenarios, right? So I have seen a project where we are doing a reporting automation, but some specific report comes from specific client on a specific day. So let's say I have 3 clients involved in the process that I've automated: client A, client B, client C. Now client B, client C, client D, they every day usually send a Excel file as a report. Okay, but once in a week, once in a week or once on a special case, they send PDF files also as an invoice copy. Now it was, I think, every Thursday and Friday they send a PDF extra as an invoice copy along with the report to kind of perform some closure and task. Okay, so some validation needs to be done. So unless and until I wait for the UAT to complete, or I also run the UAT on Thursday and Friday as well, when that PDF file is also coming along with the Excel file, my UAT would not be complete, right? So in such cases, you have to see what are the scenarios. Do you have any specific input that is coming, not random? Sometimes what happens is, I've seen another project which is a ticketing automation project. So we generally get some data from the client and we create a ticket in the tool on behalf of the client, and we take the information and email them to the user. So let's say it was for a consulting company. So let's say the client, so the consulting companies have their employees, right? So they request a lot of things. They request for a laptop, they request for a headset, they request for a mouse, they request for a stylus, right? So all these hardware things. So the company has a tool where the employees can log in and kind of submit a request, and that gets processed and it gets shipped to the company's the employee's desk. So they submit the ticket in ServiceNow. So that was the project we needed to automate on behalf of the client. So what we did is, so generally the input that comes in from the business was actually either in terms of an email, or there was a chat bot where the employees goes and chats with the chatbot, and the chatbot was integrated with the UiPath robot. So whatever query, the so immediately when you chat with the chatbot is going to ask you, what do you exactly need? The moment you tell the item or the accessory name, the chatbot will throw you a form to fill up. Okay, and once you fill the form, you push it back to the chat screen. The chatbot takes that form, saves it into the database. The moment there is an entry in the database, it triggers an input, it triggers an activity initiation to the UiPath bot. So the UiPath bot gets triggered, it takes the data from the database and start processing, and it goes to the service now, creates the ticket, fills all the information in the ticket from the form which the customer has filled. Okay, and once the ticket is created, it copies the ticket number. So generally what happens is, in service now, once you create the ticket, automatically your customer email address or employee email address is given. The ServiceNow tool itself triggers an email. Okay, but what we generally also used to do is, the ServiceNow also used to send an email. We also, the bot also takes the email, also used to take the ticket number, pass it on to the chatbot, and the chatbot used to display it on the screen. Hey, this is your ticket number for your reference. So now for this testing, we had a dependency that when the customer is ordering, or any of the business user or the employee is ordering for a laptop replacement. Okay, let's say their system is not working, they want to ask for a replacement. There are two extra forms that they need to fill. One is they need to fill it and get it approved by their manager, and another, I think, from some local IT clearance they need, that this computer cannot be repaired and it needs to be mandatorily replaced. So that forms would be given back to the client as a, I mean, to that individual user over email once they select the appropriate option. Now they have to fill it and send it back to the, I think there's a process where they have to kind of send it back to some email address, and we used to take that request from there and process it like this. Now we had to test that, so we had to wait at least 2 months to complete that phase of the unit testing, whether when we were waiting that somebody submits a request for a laptop replacement, right? We did a dummy request submission, right? We did a dummy request submission, but before going to production, we wanted to test it coming from an actual user, right? So even in production, for that phase, for that laptop submission request, we ran a pilot batch in the sense, only for those laptop submission requests we were specially monitoring how the bot is performing, because the validations are more, and that was another crucial part of the UAT. So even though the bot went to the production, there was one phase where we have informed the client that for all these laptop replacement, we're going to monitor it as a pilot batch. There might be some error even though we are in production. So whatever is the bugs that come, we would take that and rectify. So that's how you plan it. So that depends upon your project scenarios, what is the kind of projects that you are handling, what is the data that you are getting, and all these things. But generally, if it's a straightforward process, we generally run it for at least 2 weeks and monitor, ask the business to use the bot, and once they give a clearance, then the developer starts working for the production movement, right? So most of the times you see here it's written, testing the bot's output is equal to simulating humans operational activity, obviously. So why do we create a bot where we simulate or enact what the human is exactly doing? So testing output should be whatever the humans are able to perform, similarly the bot is able to carry out the same task, right? Perfect. Now what are the prerequisites for an UAT? Any questions, guys? How long does each one take? Sorry, I didn't get the question. What are you referring to, each one? I think it is come from Nemo. Okay. Each part of the cycle. Each part of the RPA cycle, oh, that depends again. So that's what. So if you are doing the initial planning of your RPA cycle, so you would be working with your project manager. So your project manager has the rights or is accountable to set up the deadline. The development deadline has to come always from the developer. The solutioning deadline always has to come from the solutioning guy. So your project manager and you would be coordinating with the solution architect and the developer to get their deadline, so to get their time frame when they're going to start solutioning. Once the solution is ready, you talk to the developer when the developer can start the development, and once the development is done, then you're going to talk to the client and see when they can start testing. So it depends. The entire project, generally if it's a high complexity project, minimum it takes 6 weeks for the bot to be tested, developed, moved to the production. If it's a medium complexity project, sometime it takes in between 3 to 4 weeks, and for low complexity projects it generally takes 1 to 2 weeks. But these are, you know uh, standard, estimated standard, but nothing goes as mandatory as, these are the time frames. Every company has its own policy. Every client that you work for, depends how the RPA framework is designed for that client, so it would vary on that as well. So for the UAT prerequisites, okay, No problem. Welcome. So for the UAT prerequisites, right? So when you're going to undergo this UAT testing, right? So test scenarios to cover for all the business use cases, all the exceptions and the business rule. So what is the first prerequisite? So you should ensure that all the business use cases that you have, the exceptions that you have undergone, uh, whether it's an application exception or a business exception, you have everything ready. Nothing is going to be missed out in the prerequisites, right? Your test data. Now, what does that mean? So test data, we have already heard of it, right? So input for the process, list of transactions or open transactions left to be posted, selected emails, documents for being processed, etc. So your test data could be based on what is the source of your input. If you are creating ticket, you need dummy information. If you are taking customers input from an email, you need dummy emails that needs to be set up. Some documentation from where you are taking, you need sample documents, right? If you want to perform any testing, if you want to perform any transaction, definitely you need some sample documents or some dummy transaction data, right? So all these are your test data which you need as an input. Your test environment. Now you always have to think of two things here. Now your test environment could be of two types. One is your robot plus orchestrator test environment. Now in UiPath, when we are deploying your UiPath orchestrator, there are two instances that gets deployed. One is the testing environment of UiPath orchestrator, which we call as the dev environment, and another is called as the production environment of UiPath. So whenever your developers are developing the bot, and you go back to the testing phase, right? So first, initially what the developer will or the implementation guys will do is they will implement the bot in the UiPath development environment. So that always remember that the UiPath orchestrator where the bots are deployed eventually on a server level has two environments. One is production and one is dev, which is called as development, or it is also called as staging. Okay, that's the testing environment. So the bot, it needs to be developed, deployed on the development environment of UiPath orchestrator if it is running on a server. Then the UiPath development orchestrator will be using the test data and the test application environment for all the UAT. So these are the two things. Now your application which the bot is going to use also has to have the testing or the development environment, because nothing we are dealing with production in testing. Okay. Next, once it moves, so you have to now analyze your process frequency. Now how the process is going to run or how the bot is going to run, that you would have already understood from the business. Is it going to run daily? Yes, one more good thing. Now, there are some processes which, let's say you have automated a process which is only going to run based on a specific day. So I worked on a project where the bot runs daily, okay, but it sends out email notification to the client on every Thursday and Wednesday, because that's the process. So I cannot send, or the bot cannot send out any email notification at the end of the execution unless and until it's a Thursday or a Wednesday. So imagine, so I run the bot daily. So for that project, we ran the UAT daily, but we had to turn off the email sending feature on. It was designed in such a way that the bot will not send any email. So before sending the email, it maps the current date and time. Okay, it checks whether today is a Wednesday or a Thursday. If it is yes, then it sends out an email, else it does not. Okay, so to test out that the emails are reaching out to this clients, that feature needs to be tested, or that feature will work only when it's a Wednesday or a Thursday. So if we are running on a Monday, you have to you will not be able to test that feature unless it is Wednesday or Thursday. So these are some, that's why the scenarios needs to be mapped. In an entire process, you might have one single activity which would be time biased or time dependent. So you have to do it on that specific time. So that's why it says you have to map the process frequencies and check if it is daily, bi-weekly, monthly, or quarterly, right? So there are some projects, some financial projects where the, let's say, one of the projects that I've seen was, I think you would have heard of Salesforce. So Salesforce is one of the important tool into the market where all the companies put their financial information, right? So what they do is all the financial information that they have, they bundle it at the end of the month and they calculate the revenue for the company. So all the income sources, all the services that the company sell, all the expenditure that the company have are entered in the Salesforce, and they bundle the information for a specific month, and they calculate the financial stats. So there was one project for an SFDC where we had to take 6 to 10, 7 clients, and whatever the company is earning from that client as a service, right? So all these informations were gathered on a database every day, I mean, on a weekly basis. And at the end of the month, those entire weekly information needs to be clubbed and the financial calculation was performed. So they have already a calculation formula. So we just had to pass that formula within the UiPath robot so that it calculates the similar functionality, right? So that bundling testing we could only do at the end of the month because there is no chance that we test it during the middle of the month, because unless and until it's the fourth week, we will not be receiving all the data. So even in the test environment, what they used to do, used to create dummy data, but the dummy data comes from the production itself. Okay, so whatever they create in the production, similarly in the test environment of the application, that data comes in. We use the testing phase, we do not touch the production, but we had to wait for entire 4 weeks for the data to come in, because we wanted to test it on a real-time data rather than taking any dummy data. And some applications, process depend financial informations, right? You are not allowed to create any dummy information as well. So you have to take some authentic business data and run it in the test environment so that it does not impact the production. So there are a lot of, lot of process related company, organization related, company related, which are a challenge. So based on that, your planning needs to be there, right? So your process frequency, daily, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly. Any questions on this, guys, before we move ahead? Any questions on the test environment? Sorry, which part? Could you just mention it? Is it from the example that I gave? You want me to repeat, or which part is that? Okay, no, I just wanted to say that, yeah. So this is how your process frequency mapping comes into picture. So you have to check if the environment date needs to be updated. So that's what it means. So if your processes are time dependent, weekly, monthly, quarterly, so your environment also needs to be set up in such a way. Check if EOD or EOM needs to run. EOD is nothing but end of the day. EO is nothing but end of the month. So you have to, that's what I meant. So if you have to check whether your process frequency maps anything that needs to run at the end of the day. Let's say there could be any process that you have to collect, that you have to run only at the end of the business hour, right? So there could be anything that, as I gave you an example, that we can bundle the information only at the end of the month once the 4 weeks are complete. So all these things comes as your process frequency, which you need to kind of set your environments as well based on that. Understand the number of times for which the data can be restored if needed. Yes. Now what happens in some scenarios, let's say the test data are given. So let's say you are working on some a transactional automation, and some test information has been given to you. Now what happens is companies sometimes restrict the number of test data that they give because of security compliance. So let's say you have been given the test data and you have used it this week. Now your robot has entered those data into the system and it has completed the transaction. Now for the second week, you do not have any test data available. So what you need to do, you need to go back and ask the business users to manually delete those data that has been utilized so that we can rerun the test again. Right? So let's say you have to enter a ticket number into a system. There are 5 dummy ticket numbers given. So Monday to Friday, 5 tests, you have utilized 5 ticket numbers. These are already entered into the system now. Now next week, Monday, when you're going to run, you need a 6th ticket number which you don't have. So how are you going to perform the testing? So what you do, you go back and restore the data. So you go back and delete the data that the bot has created over the last 5 days and start fresh. So that's where your measurement needs to be there, that how many times do you need to restore your data based on your UAT planning and based on the number of test data you have in your hand. Next, dependencies with other projects on the same environment. Yes. So what happens is, let's say when your development environment is there for UiPath, let's say, initially a company has only one single server and there are multiple projects that needs to be tested. So you need to coordinate with the other developers who are working on certain other projects. So let's say your testing bot is scheduled to run at 10 p.m. Eastern Central Time. You have to, and there is only one single server where multiple projects are running. So before scheduling or thing, you have to consult the implementation guys and check, are there any other project or any other bot that you can run? If it is already there, you might need to ask your client that, hey, what are the dependencies on the implementation? Can we run it at 10:30 p.m. EST instead of 10 p.m.? So this is called dependency of environment or the same environment of another project or another bot. Okay. Now receive an estimate of the test duration in one run, how long it would take the robot to perform the expected action. Yes. So this is where your estimation of one run is very, very important. So you have to kind of execute and get it from the developer that how long it's going to run, because similar information you need to pass on to the implementation engineer. Now what happens is, sometimes in one server multiple processes are executed by robots. Okay. So let's say you have worked on a ticketing process, somebody else have worked on an email automation, somebody else have worked on a reporting project. Now these three processes are executed by the same robot on the server. Now unless and until your developer specifies that, hey, my robot exactly needs 20 minutes to complete, this information is not given to the implementation engineer. So the person who is kind of monitoring or administrating the console, it becomes very tough for him. He cannot schedule the bots accordingly, right? So if you say 20 minutes, so 10 p.m. to 10:20, is your time slot. So he might schedule another bot at 10:30. But if your bot takes any extra time, it will collide with the execution time of another bot. So this is all comes as, a part of your implementation planning, where your implementation guys has to be very much in business or in sync, so that so whoever is the support team and, people who work on the orchestration part or the monitoring part, they need to be very careful about it when the bot goes to the production as well. So that's where your monitoring of the robots are very, very important. Your scheduling, your maintenance. It's a proverb that's commonly said in RPA these days, that it's very tough to maintain a robot than to develop a robot. And that's practically identified, so it's easy. It's said that it's much more easier for you to create, but it's very difficult to maintain it, because whenever you are maintaining something, you have a car, you have a bike, right? Obviously you have a maintenance cost, right? So every year you have to spend a certain amount of money. So creating a software robot is nothing but you are creating a software device, right? So every device has its own maintenance, right? So you need to set up that thing accurately. So that's how it is, right? Clarify with the developer how an intermediary output can be verified. Yes. So sometimes what happens, intermediary output in the sense, as I said, that when for this financial project, at the end of the month only we can bundle the data, but till the fourth week we have to complete all the other process. So that means till the fourth week I'm getting partial output, I'm getting intermediate output. Only at the end of the fourth week, when the bot bundles all the information and performs the final calculation, my process is complete end to end. Before that, I cannot say that the bot is performing an end-to-end task, and I cannot test it. I cannot say the testing is also complete. So you have to check with your developer that in case of any intermediary output, are there any dependencies, or how can you verify it? So what we used to do is, all the fourth week, that 4 weeks that the bot is going to perform, it's going to send out an email with the data as in an Excel file, so that we can verify that the bot is performed and this is what it has done today. And once it is end of the fourth week, it's going to collate all the informations over the past 4 weeks, perform the financial calculation, send out a final notification email. So that's how, you kind of plan your prerequisites of UAT. You get involved into the executabilities, you talk to the developers for any dependencies, any intermediary output. You check for the dependencies when running UAT and things like that. Okay. Any questions, guys? Okay, perfect. So we're going to move on to the next topic. Okay, so now we're going to actually, I've already kind of discussed certain things already. So now we're going to see what's the UAT plan structure. Okay, so the UAT plan structure. So the structure is very simple, right? So we already know that we have the design, we have the strategy, design, execution, defect management, and then UAT sign off. So this is just to show you how do you structure it. So first you should know what you're going to do. So you're going to test if the robot performs some actions and outputs as the user does. Test new outputs as described in the PDD. So this is what you're going to do. When and where you're going to do, we're going to define the total time duration, the start date and end date of your UAT. When your tests are scheduled according to the test durations and test availability, ideally bring all the testers in the same room. So whoever is going to test every phase of the bot, you keep them all together. Now who's going to do this? The process owners, the BA developer, the BA and the COE. So you might have your support team, you might have your business team, and you have your developers along with yourself as a business analyst, right? Then how are you going to perform the testing? So that's the phase we have already discussed. So you have your scheduled testing, you have your training team, so who is going to perform the testing, right? Now the testers to perform the task that the robot is eventually carrying out. So you log all the results but your testing activity pass. Then we restore the test environment if it is required. As I said, if your all dummy data are used, you have to restore it again and then run the bot. So run the robot and compare the results once again, log and debug all the issues that are there, establish reporting metrics, repeat until the result meets the success criteria. So that means, let's say you certain test cases have failed, so you want to rerun them, you can go and re-execute and check whether it is working. If multiple reruns gives you a failure, that means there's a bug, so you go back and report it to the developer, right? So what are the tools you're going to use? You will have only two things. You will have your test scenario template and you have your issue log template. So any log, any defect that is identified, you're going to report it, update it in the issue log and send it to the developer, right? Perfect. So just give me a quick second. Okay, so now once your testing is complete and you get a UAT sign off, we prepare for something called as go live. Now what is the go live preparation a BA role does in go live is very simple. So you're going to deliver certain trainings to your SMEs and your business operation. How do they need to run the bot? Where do they need to run the bot? Where do they keep the data? So you create a training manual for them. Okay, so all these things you need to pass on, all the supporting guides, all the user process and help. The team that will be still involved in the operation, so your post implementation monitoring team needs to be there. The support team needs to be added by now. So the support team are the ones who are going to monitor the execution and the performance of the bot. Your support from the COE and your technical support team. So this is like, you don't have all involvements of the business analyst here. Your project manager will eventually be involved, But you just need to know that your go live preparation is very simple. Once your UAT is clear, you create a manual which explains the end-to-end execution of the bot. You engage your support team, your developer starts working on moving the bot to the production, you finalize the date, and that the bot is released on that specific day. Okay. Now, preparing your go live, as I said, your user manual and your lessons learned. So what are the difficulties that you had that might be given to your project manager or your manager as a report? So you have the description of the new process, you describe the final inputs and outputs, you describe the process scheduling, you describe how to reset the data if there is any issue, you describe reporting and dashboards, error handling, and hand over the user manual. So that's the entire phase that we kind of cover up during the go live preparation. So lessons learned means update the documents, don't start writing it, it should be written from the first stage and structured accordingly. Okay. Now collect input from all team members as per the activity. Now every team or every individual that has worked on the project might have some lessons learned. So your organization might, or your manager might say you to document them so that they can review it, so that you don't repeat such scenarios in the next project, right? Now document what's triggered issues and how to identify which is the easier way to solve them in future. Describe events and outcomes, not people. Describe what teams were impacted by the change. So if there are any change requests that's going to come from the client, right? So how you're going to handle them, who was the support, who is the point of contact that the client needs to connect. So all these things you need to pass on to the hands-on or the user manager or the client. So that's all is all about your go live production mapping. Nothing much you have to do after UAT sign off. It's all kind of self-proclaimed process that you're going to follow as normal application development happens, right? So with this, we come to the conclusion. So we have your assignment for this week. So you have to research on various parameters of performing testing evaluation in RPA. So if I gonna perform certain performance testing of my bot, what are the parameters that I am gonna consider to kind of map the, or to kind of calculate or evaluate the performance of a robot? So performance testing of a robot in RPA, what sort of parameters you gonna use? Think through and kind of set that, okay, if I am the business analyst and I'm performing and testing, I expect my bot to be judged on this parameters, right? Perfect. Any questions from anybody before we wind up for the day? No questions? Okay. Any questions from anyone with respect to the assignments? So I hope you're able to submit your assignments till the last session, right? What session number is this? So this is assignment 7. So you have to kind of create a folder name with assignment 7 and then push your file. No, I think the reason is, the reason here is for one module we had 2 assignments, I think. So that's where you are kind of little confused, I guess. Right. So let me just check here. Session slides. Yeah, so we already had 7 sessions, right? So this was our session number 8. So with session number 8, you're gonna have assignment number 7. I don't think it's anything we are missing, but anyways, I'll check on the numbers. If anything has been misplaced, and I'll go ahead and update it here. So let's check for the last assignment number. So this is what we did last week, right? PDD creation. Okay, that was assignment 6, right? SIPOC and MI and I mean management information and time and motion, right? Okay, yeah, that's correct. So I think, yeah. So for one session, I think we did not have a assignment that will be kind of an overall. So that's why total seven session, and today's it's eighth session, and yeah, seven assignments, correct. Yeah, so today's one I'm going to publish it after this session, so you get the slides and you get the assignment topic as well. This may be early, but we I didn't get your question. When will the study sheet be put out for our mock interviews? Oh yes, I think Bob already has a plan in place for the mock interviews, right? So he's going to conduct that, and he has some sort of questions that he's going to kind of. I think he has an overall plan set up with him for the mock interviews. And yeah, the mock interview is going to happen after the completion of the entire course, actually. Okay, you're saying today's it should be 8, right? Okay, I'll check the numbers. Okay, perfect. Hey, thanks for bringing that out, guys. So I'll check the number and I'll just kind of update it accordingly. Might be I just misnumbered it. So I'll make the numbers as so once I upload it, all the files, I'll check the numbers and I'll fix it accordingly. Yeah. Okay, thanks guys for bringing that up. Yep. Good night and talk to you tomorrow. Bye bye.